Seti I's tomb, number 17. One of the most significant and spacious royal tombs from the 19th dynasty is thought to have been carved out of the rock of the Valley of the King's Mountain. It belonged to Seti I. Its 98 meters of length, vivid colors, beautiful scenes, and amazing inscriptions still set it apart today. Even if it was recognized back when Greece ruled Egypt, it is referred to as the tomb of Beltzoni in certain scholarly publications because it was rediscovered by him on October 17, 1817, and as a result, it bears his name. The tomb belongs to the same phase that Horemheb initiated. There are two parallel axes in it. The first axis starts at the entryway and continues through the corridors and well chamber. From there, we enter a large room that has 4 pillars arranged in 2 rows. This is where the second axis starts, and it connects to the burial chamber by many descending staircases and corridors. The obvious architectural additions that mark the end of the first axis may be where the innovation resides. There is a chamber with 4 ceiling pillars rather than the traditional 2. Similarly, the following room has never been seen before. The existence of shelves in the burial chamber's second left side room where some statues or priceless pieces of funerary furniture were probably placed is another feature mentioned in the second axis. Text-wise, we can follow the new passages on the walls of this tomb since it has the lengthy litany of Re, which points to the Eye of Horus, and the Book of the Cow, which tells the tale of mankind's destruction. This is on top of prior knowledge, including that included in the books Amduat and the Book of Gates. The most well-known paintings are those depicting planets and constellations in astronomy, which are painted on the burial chamber's vaulted ceiling. The transition from the previous scenes we saw in Horemheb's tomb to the ones here is also noticeable. Here, it has become a realistic fact that can be traced in most of the scenes of this tomb, many of which are carved in relief and bright colors, though in some places we can only see the outer lines of some of them. These sketches are valuable because they shed light on the processes and procedures used to create these amazing artworks in the darkened chambers cut into the mountainside rock. The tomb starts with a descending staircase that opens into a corridor with vultures spreading their wings as ceiling decoration. Regarding the wall to the right, we already mentioned that it was the first place where hymns of praise to the sun deity Re were recorded. On the left, the king is depicted in front of the god Re Horakiti. Then the sacred trinity of the sun in its various phases, between a snake and a crocodile. Inside the sun disk, there is the scarab keeper, symbolizing the bright morning sun, and the sun disk Re, symbolizing the powerful noon sun, and lastly, there is an image of a human ram-headed god, representing the god Adam as a symbol of the setting sun. Next, we come to a descending stairway with 2 sunken niches on either side. In these niches, we can see scenes depicting the forms of the demons on the right and left, whose names are displayed in vertical columns, as well as portions of hymns to the god Re, and the start and finish of the 4th hour of the book Amduat. The goddesses Nephthys and Isis are depicted kneeling in the scenes on the right and left, respectively. The winged goddess Mot is depicted kneeling on the lintel of the entrance to the corridor. Isis and Nephthys in the shape of a jackal are located on the thickness of the door on both sides. Next, we come to a corridor with scenes painted on the walls that correspond to the 4th and 5th hours in the book Amdawat, respectively. Following that, we arrive at the well chamber, where the lovely scenes painted on the walls above the well stand out. The gods Horus, son of Isis, and Anubis are seen on the left, followed in a later scene by the goddess Hathor, to whom the king offers wine. Next, we see the king standing before Osiris, and lastly, we see Imentet, the goddess of the west. With a few minor variations, the scenery is nearly identical to what we see on the right. We now reach a hall with 4 pillars, and on the left are passages and scenes from the Book of Gates' 4th chapter. Most notable is the scene that depicts the 4 races of humanity: Egyptian, Asian, Nubian, and Libyan. Regarding the right, there are passages and scenes from the Book of Gates' 5th chapter. The typical scenes of the king's relationships with the gods and goddesses, including Ta, Horus, son of Isis, Imentet, Re Horakti, Shu, Selkut, Isis, Hathor, Atum, Nephthys, Neith, and Tesokar, are depicted on the surfaces of the 4 pillars. We go from this hall to a 2-pillared hall that is aligned with the tomb's first axis. It should be noted that this room scenes were not carved, instead, only passages and scenes from the book What is in the Netherworld, Amdawad, were painted in red and corrected in black on the walls. On the first pillar, the king was depicted in his various relationships with Nefertum, Rehorokti, Mot, and Atum. On the second column, however, the king is seen with Mot, performing purification and burning incense in front of Osiris while accepting the necklace Mened from the goddess Hathor, and lastly with the god Sokar Osiris. Once more, we enter the 4-pillar hall and descend the steps on the left to enter a corridor. A list of offerings is seen on the right, followed by hymns of praise that are aimed towards the god Horus's eye and continue along the walls of the next corridor. A group of priests is then seen performing the opening the mouth ritual in front of some royal statues on the right. The king is seated with a table of offerings in front of him, followed by a group of priests doing religious rites in front of several regal sculptures, and finally texts relating to the opening the mouth ceremony. These scenes are located on the left side of the 2 preceding corridors. The chamber that is located before the burial chamber is then reached, which is a little room. The typical scenes that we frequently see on the walls of such rooms are depicted on its walls. It symbolizes the king's many relationships to different gods and goddesses. Hathor, Anubis, Horus, son of Isis, Osiris, Wennefer, and Ta are located on the left. The same gods and goddesses are seen on the right, with the exception of Ta, who Nefertum replaced, just as it did in Horemheb's tomb. We have now arrived at the burial chamber, a rectangular space supported by 6 pillars arranged in 2 rows. The standard scenes that depict the king in his relationships with the many gods and goddesses were represented on the facades of the 4 pillars at the front section of the burial chamber. It should be noted that scenes depicting the spirits of the city Pe as a human with the head of a falcon is found on the left pillars, while a scene depicting the spirits of the city Nakan as a human with the head of a jackal is found on the final pillar on the right pillars. The first and 4th chapters of the Book of Gates are represented by the scenes on the left side of the room, and the 2nd chapter is represented by the scenes on the right. The sarcophagus was situated in the final section of the burial chamber, which we have now reached. The vaulted ceiling in this section, which symbolizes the sky, sets it apart. It had the imaginative astronomical images that the ancient Egyptians imagined, depicting constellations, planets, and stars. It is important to take attention of the scenes depicting the winged goddesses Nephthys kneeling on the right and the winged goddesses Isis kneeling on the left. This section's texts and scenes are primarily taken from the book Amdawad. After Beltzoni brought the sarcophagus to John Soane, who paid £2,000 sterling for it, it is being kept in preservation at the Soane Museum in London. There were 5 rooms in the burial chamber, 2 rooms to the right, 2 rooms to the left, and a room with 4 pillars that we could enter through the depression where the sarcophagus was placed. The writings that tell the myth of mankind's destruction and the well-known image of the goddess Hathor, a standing cow whose belly is meant to symbolize the sky with stars on it, distinguish the first room on the right. 8 gods support her legs beneath the heavenly cow, each leg is supported by 2 gods. She is raised by the deity Shu, the god of air, and over her sails the ship of the god Re. Shelves running along 3 sides are likewise present in the other room with the 2 pillars on the left. It's probable that these were meant to hold jewels or statues. In the burial chamber, we finally find a descending stairway that leads to an unknown corridor that extends up to 140 meters at a 45-degree steep incline. We are unsure of the function of this corridor. In the Deir el-Bahari cache, King Seti I's mummy was discovered in 1881.